Welcome to the Daily Apple. I'm your host, Kevin White. My occasional co-host, Emma Ryan, and I will dive into all topics related to the science of longevity, along with some other subjects we just find of interest, with the hopes to provide useful information for everyone. This stems from my personal interest to optimize the human condition. It's not just live longer, but to live better. Hey everyone, welcome back. I am here with the amazing, wonderful Dr. Jarrod Spencer, Doctor of Psychology. And I'm really jazzed and excited about this one. I've been looking forward to it for a long time, so I'm glad we could make the time. But he's got an illustrious career, worked with Olympians, pro athletes, high capacity individuals, and really helps them, operate at 100%. And what am I leaving out, Jarrod?
My kids would say I'm just a dorky dad as well. We probably have to add that to the list of things.
Oh man, no. But yeah, it's really great to be here, and I want to just thank you for your time. Thank you for making time today. I know you're a busy guy, and you're a little bit in the off season right now. So yeah, I just want to get into we'll just start off and jump right into some things, and then we'll go from there. But tell me about some things that you're dealing with right now. Your career has evolved with dealing with high-end pro athletes, Olympians, and all that stuff. And now you're dealing with a whole different clientele, and the landscape is different now. So I kind of want to get into that real quick. What do you got to say? What do you think?
Concierge psychologist, that's really the path that I've gone now, and I'm transitioning into even more so to work with high-capacity leaders. Mm-hmm. Everything I've learned working with Olympians and pro athletes and large company execs like Microsoft, taking it to a smaller, unique clientele where I come to the clientele and I come to that individual and share with those small group of leaders what I'm seeing out there on the front lines for all these other individuals. And so the idea there is if I can help the people at the top of society, the ripple effect down is really what I'm trying to do.
So you actually go to the clientele? That's a different kind of...
Right. I mean, because the clientele that I'm serving, they don't want to be seen in public. And because I'm a licensed psychologist, there's confidentiality. So I fly to them, I go to them, meet with them in wherever they want, be it one of their homes or on their jet, where they travel, like their place of business, wherever they want, just go to them and help them for as long as it takes. There's no stop or start time like a traditional psychologist. The idea is whatever it takes, as often as it takes, let's get after it.
With the landscape as it is right now, what are some common things that you see with those types of individuals, or with anybody for that matter, that keeps them from working at 100% capacity and doing well? What are some things that you see holding them back, and what are some steps you do to deal with that?
Kevin, it's burnout.
Yeah,
it's just an emotional fatigue. People tend to be in great physical shape, but emotionally, their capacity, that's the limitation. They can do amazing things with their skills and their gifts and their talent and their resources, the people and the money, all that. That's fine for many individuals, but the limitation is emotional. And that's manifesting itself in burnout, where privately, behind closed doors, people are just saying, I'm just tired. Mm-hmm. I don't know how much more I can do this, or I want to do this. I mean, I love it, but I'm just fatigued. And so we have to deal and address the emotionality of life today. And for a lot of the clientele, now, of course, a lot of clientele that I'm serving and talking about right now is Gen X, right? Looking at 25 to 60-year-olds. But that's not to say that the younger population, the high school athlete, the college athlete, the young pro athlete, is not also experiencing burnout, because they are. So burnout is the largest theme among everybody, but particularly for the genre Gen X. Burnout.
That's us, Jarrod.
It is. It's us, and it's an interesting place in society because Gen X is now kind of leading most companies, organizations, and with those leaders in places of high capacity and access to a lot of the funding, they got to be at the best. But we're struggling emotionally as a generation.
So you're right up close and personal to that. It's in your face all the time as you're dealing with these guys. What are some causes that you see from that? And we'll get into some steps on how you deal with that.
Well, I mean, the root cause of it is simply this. Life is so emotional today. 2025, the stigma of mental health has fallen, and there's a younger generation that we are parenting that desperately are looking for the mental, emotional skills to manage the life that they have today. Now, social media being a massive part of it, having access to the phone and technology, all of that has changed their landscape. So they don't have the skills, and they're looking for those skills from Gen X. But we don't have those skills. Like, we grew up in a suck it up, don't whine, don't complain, we're not going to talk about it
Yeah.
world. And the
Yeah.
only way you deal with negative emotions is like to just stuff it, bury it, avoid it, and keep working hard. And so they're looking to us, but we don't have it to give to them. So as parents and as employers, like, we're trying the best we possibly can because we want to be better than our parents were to us, but we don't have the missing piece. And so teachers are leaving education at a rate faster than we've ever seen. School administrators are leaving at a rate faster. And nurses, physicians, just tired of going to room to room to room and dealing with this high emotionality that we don't necessarily, med school, nursing school, they don't really teach the skills to deal with that emotional part of health. And yet that's pervasive everywhere. So as you get the speed of business, particularly the tech companies, the speed of business, the dog eat dog world of pro sports, which is really vicious behind the scenes, there's a lot of emotionality. And if we can develop more tools to put in the mental toolbox for ourselves, then we can be more effective at what we're doing, how we're doing it. More importantly, how are we emotionally while doing it? That's the key.
So say that again. I think that last few sentences you just said, I think that needs to be repeated. Kind of really for me. I just want to hear
Yeah.
this.
Like, how are we really doing? Like, how are we really feeling?
Yeah.
Like, our generation is really good at doing
Yeah.
and producing and the behaviors and the actions, but like, how are you feeling? Like, how are you really feeling when we take off the mask, when we can just be transparent and real and authentic? And what I'm hearing from most people at that point in time is like, I'm kind of drained. And we
Mm-hmm.
all have these drains. Well, what are the drains? And it's like every one of us, every person listening to this has complex interpersonal dynamics with somebody where we're just struggling a little bit, and it's a drain on the emotional energy. And that's a key word right there, the phrase emotional energy. When we talk about burnout, we're talking about emotional energy management.
How do so that's the problem. You've got people, they're overloaded, never mind all the technology that's expanded at a rate that's faster than we evolve as humans. And then they have other people with the same issues, maybe that underneath them, if they're, CEOs of companies or, dealing with other people. And that's draining on their emotional tank, I guess, if you will.
Yes.
How do you, as you're dealing with somebody like that, what you're saying is they're, become more aware how they're feeling and all that kind of stuff. But what are some steps to avoid burnout in those people? What do you do to
Yeah.
help with that? Kind of correct that.
Let me give you step one, step two. Step one is understanding what is emotional energy.
Yeah.
And emotional energy is a person's psychological capacity to effectively deal with the immediate stressors in their life. Right here, right now, how effective can we be based upon our psychological capacity? That's step one, understand that concept. Step two is understanding we measure emotional energy on a self-report scale of 0 to 100, just like a grading system in school. In the 90s is an A. You feel amazing. You'll have a great workout. You're optimistic, positive, resilient. You can handle things effectively. In the 80s is pretty good too. It's a B. It's not bad. Like, you're still really being productive. And in the 70s, though, you're fatiguing. You know it. You can feel it, but you're still positive. But anything below 70, because 70 is a tipping point number. Anything below 70, you're in Dsville and Fsville, and that's not good. That's
Yeah.
when negative thinking kicks in, and that's when you become pessimistic, you become toxic, you become counterproductive, and you're actually not the emotionally healthiest version of yourself anymore. You're probably doing more damage than good. And as you get lower on that scale, at some point, you just need to like call it a day, go home, get into bed, and just shut it down, because the negativity that you have at that moment, the emotional drain, the fatigue is really quite significant. So burnout is when we're chronically around the tipping point number, just barely keeping our head above water and not really thriving like we want to, or maybe once were.
So let's say you have somebody who's a 60 or 70.
Yeah.
Where do what's your guide or direction for those people? Because I know I'm oftentimes I'll run at 70 or 60 and just kind of push through because it's the American way. But there's you can leave a lot of damage in your wake, whether it be poor performance, damage to relationships, domestic issues and all that. And it seems like that kind of cycles and can be a snowball thing. But so you have somebody, they're aware, they're like, hey, I suck. This is, I'm at 70. I'm drowning. What do I do?
Yeah. Well, this is really where in our culture and society, we have to get on the path. And the path is really about learning about how the mind works best. We've got to open ourselves up to the path of psychology and learning as much as we can. So the way we help an individual once they are open to the path is two things. One, outside in head knowledge. Read these books, listen to this podcast, watch this YouTube video. The more we put outside in head knowledge, the tools in the toolbox, that's what we need. That's what younger generations are saying. Teach us, explain it to us. As a professional speaker going out there, that is a lot of what I do. It's putting the tools in the toolbox so they can understand anxiety, fear of the unknown, depression, held in, as we can understand these concepts and have tools. That's half the battle. The other half of the battle is the inside out knowledge. And that is experienced through catharsis, a freeing of repressed emotion. When we have a chance to like open up to an individual who we feel is competent and that they can help us and they're trustworthy and particularly legally protected, then we can say, I want to share something with you that I don't share with many people, if anybody, but this drains me emotionally. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to resolve this. But when we can have that cathartic experience, and of course, as a health and sports psychologist, that's my forte, is to really get into that space to say, okay, well, let me help you with that. And as we can emotionally diffuse those emotional bombs within us, then we can have a clearer mind. And when the mind's clearer, we feel better, our health is better, and our performance is better.
Since I've known you, you do a good job at kind of protecting your time and your own emotional energy, it seems like. From knowing you and kind of you're very particular about your schedule, you're very busy. Like we said, this is the off season, but you're traveling and stuff. And you seem to do a really good job at protecting your time with your wife and your kids. And a lot of us don't do that intentionally like you do. Are those some instructions for people that you kind of guide them on, or
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, I don't want to be the hypocrite, right? The guy kind of saying this stuff but not living this stuff, right? So it's very important that I live it, because I'm just like everybody else, right? Like I'm struggling, like I'm tired, I'm burnt out, I have anxiety and depression and insomnia. I'm human, like we all do. And so the thing about it that's a little different for me is this: I've dedicated my life to this path, to learning as much as I can, and I love it. And I love feeling good. I love thriving, and I love helping people unlock potential and reach their goals and their dreams and be liberated from stress. So I do live a lifestyle that's very intentional about protecting my emotional energy.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key pieces to how another person can do that is simply this: it's about the people, places, and things in our life that raise our emotional energy and gravitating to them, and minimizing as best we possibly can those people, places, and things that drain us of our emotional energy.
So avoid the drainers. What are some common drainers as you're working with somebody that you'll see over and over? And from the outside in, you can say, "Hey, dude, that's a That's a drain, man. You're draining your emotional energy this way, and it might be a light bulb to somebody that you're working with, say.
Well, interestingly, a lot of it's not so much of a light bulb moment. It's the obvious. It's like, look, we have family members. We all have family members. We have in-laws, right? People we married into. Like all of that stuff is very normal. It's those people aren't leaving our lives, but they're an emotional drain.
Not
You
for
know?
us, though. Not for
No,
us.
of course
Not
not
our
us. No,
in-laws.
not us. Not us.
But yeah.
Everyone we love, we're right. But like those are oftentimes, or they're like, look, I'm in a career. I work for this company. I'm leading this company. I'm the president of this company, CEO of the company. But the reality is, like, these dynamics, particularly at the top, get complicated.
Mm-hmm.
How do I deal with those people or this environment that I'm in? And so, in particular, people know, like, yeah, when I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm thinking about stuff. Here's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the common thing is the 2 or 3 o'clock wake up and then the dee your
Right.
mind
There
chews
we
on
go.
stuff.
There we go. Yep.
How do you, and I'm sure you analyze like a surgeon going through that stuff with your clients, but whenever you see that, somebody waking up thinking about whatever it is at 2 or 3, and a lot of times those are the same things for people in my experience, and myself included, what are some things you instruct them to kind of help with dealing with that?
Well, the very first thing we have to do is recognize, like, that's an emotionally charged, ongoing, unresolved psychological stressor in your life, and we need to get after that one. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so what does that mean? Get after it. It means, as best we can,
Mm-hmm.
we need to get eyeball to eyeball, face to face with the individual and be able to express ourselves assertively, no longer being passive, which is what oftentimes people are, and no longer aggressive, because that's oftentimes how we respond when we're kind of fired up. Then we say things that we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube about, and we do more damage than good. So being assertive, using I feel statements, not I think statements, because we can argue about I think, but I feel statements, speaking the truth as lovingly as we possibly can, but saying what we need to say, which is basically what we're doing at 3 o'clock in the morning, is playing in our head like, I wish I would say that to that person. Well, we have to. But that's not easy to do with complex personalities, because the person is going to run interference. They're going to find ways to not allow that conversation to unfold that way. And so therein lies the work that needs to be done, and often what I help people with.
Just learning how to communicate and deal with that stuff so they can
Yeah.
sleep better at night as well.
Yeah. Yeah. With the people that
Yeah.
we can't quite do it,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
an example might be, somebody may say, like, I love my parent, but there's a sibling, but there's really a lot there, and it's really hard to communicate to the sibling or the parent about, stressors, and it doesn't usually go well. And so that's a very common example.
Yeah. So you said one, being aware, right? And then two, information as far as the outside in and then inside out. Outside being in, just as far as the data, the books or whatever, and inside out, which would be working with somebody such as yourself or whatever. But the being in that cathartic experience and kind of getting that out is important. Okay. And then dealing with those things, step three, expressing yourself. And correct me if I'm wrong. Am I missing something there, Jarrod?
No, everything's right. The part that I would highlight is that, the emotional energy score is a really important number. So
Yeah.
being able to communicate to a loved one, say, because a lot of people are really good,
Yeah.
particularly at Gen X, of like fronting and appearing well, but
Yeah.
inside be like, I'm a 42 on the emotional energy scale right here. And some people be like, I didn't even know,
Yeah.
because you are so adept at fronting, is what people would say. That
Yeah.
So we need to communicate, maybe at the end of the day, come home, see a spouse, a loved one, partner, significant other, and say, I'm like a 65 right now. Sorry, I'm just drained. Be like, oh, now that I know you're 65, like, that helps me, as opposed to maybe, I would approach you differently had I thought you were an 85, but you're a 65, and that's a very different internal experience.
Yeah.
Communicating the emotional energy scale is the one part of that I want to highlight before we move on to the next part, which is probably, what else do we do to keep our emotional energy higher, right?
Yeah. So that would be step 3, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah. What are
the
your?
answer the answer to that one is simply parasympathetic nervous system.
Mhm.
So that makes sense to you, but maybe it's not some of our listeners. Our nervous system essentially has two main divisions, two branches. Sympathetic, which wakes you up in the morning, which is responsible for go, 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 go. And
Mhm.
parasympathetic, which is what puts us to sleep at night, is relax, relax, relax. And what I've learned in my work that I'm doing on the front lines with individuals is that most people are really good at going, but when it comes time to relax
Mhm.
and have parasympathetic, we don't do that intentionally. In fact, most people will say, on average, I'm sleeping 6 hours a day,
Mhm.
but sleep is the number one factor in mental health and performance. So we have to take care of sleep. But we can't take care of sleep until we deal with the cell phone addiction problem, the cell phone in the bed, which is the number one reason why people aren't falling asleep as quick, is because they're just lying in bed looking through TikTok videos. So they're tired. And because people are only averaging 6 hours of sleep a day, and when they do get a break, relaxation looks like I lie on the couch. The first thing I do is pull out my phone and I just play games or scroll and do that. So we don't even know how to relax without a phone. But the more parasympathetic nervous system activity we can cultivate in a better way, then we can actually have more balance in our nervous system to the go, 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 go. And thus we will be able to counter act the imbalance of the busy, crazy life we have, and we can feel more relaxed and better.
So yeah, the autonomic system has two branches. I mean, I've really gotten into this a lot more since I did this specific sleep study that did this cardiopulmonary coupling and all this stuff. And I found out my sleep is really fragmented. Not to get it off on a tangent. Let's just talk about me for a while, Jarrod. But and fragmented because I'm in this sympathetic overdrive, and I thought I had it dialed in, but there's a lot going on in Kevin's life right now that so now I've been more intentional about getting into parasympathetic in the evening. Not perfect all the time, but how we have we have a morning routine, but we should have an evening routine as well. But you said it real well there. We do a really crappy job about getting into that parasympathetic mode. We're good at getting amped up for things, but we're not getting good at getting wound down. So, I mean,
Right. That's the key.
what are some easy tricks and tips to kind of get into that parasympathetic mode, that relaxation mode? What are some things you do and what are some things you recommend to your clients?
Well, this is really the biggest difference I see in pro sports versus high school and college sports is that in
Yeah.
pro sports, there's a huge, huge emphasis on rest, recharge, and recovery.
Yeah.
And in my world growing up, the one thing that was communicated was if you're resting, you're lazy,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So resting wasn't valued, but in pro sports, resting is intentional. It's science. It's really, really productive. So taking the plays out of the pro athlete playbook and putting that into another individual's daily habits is really key. Now, of all the things that I've seen out there, one of the most important that I often start with in terms of like, how do we get the parasympathetic going? Dr. Nicholas Hall, a neuropsychoimmunologist, said during one of these continuing education programs I went to years ago, a small little thing that I've actually found to be like incredibly profound in my life and for most people's lives when it comes to the parasympathetic. He said, there's a minute in our circadian rhythm when we would ideally fall asleep each night. And that minute's different for every person, but our rhythm is so specific that there's literally a minute that you really do want to fall asleep and actually really do want to wake up. But most people today don't even know that minute because they are so accustomed to keeping electronic in front of them
Yeah.
all the way up to they fall asleep that
Yeah.
it's somewhere in the ballpark. But if you can know the minute and hit the minute, your sleep is going to be so much better. And here's the way to tell the minute. Every evening, every night, a person is going to experience a great big yawn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that big yawn is actually the pineal gland's release of melatonin. And you feel that wash of fatigue come over you. And generations before, they'd say, okay, like now it's time to get ready for bed. But now we say, oh man, I got to push through, and we get back to our electronics. But if we pay attention to this significant yawn, and at that point in time, no more electronics. I personally take my cell phone, I put it on the other side of the master bedroom on a charging station. I'm done. And so no more, because exactly 1 hour after the yawn is the minute a person would ideally fall asleep. And if you can allow the brain and the melatonin to ramp down and do what it needs to do, dim the lights, right? Maybe take a shower, maybe read a book for pleasure, but really allow the brain to shut down and do what it wants to do naturally, then we can hit that minute.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, most people are stimulating the brain, looking at all kinds of stuff and getting the brain going that they miss the minute, catch their second wind, and then it's about an hour and a half to the next big opportunity comes on that circadian rhythm. So we got to hit that minute. For me, 9 o'clock is when the yawn comes. 10:10 is the minute. If I hit that minute, I go right into my cycle, and I'm going to have so much better quality rest, recharge, recovery.
That's so funny, Jarrod, because so we've been to Scotland twice, and we've been, to your place in Pennsylvania, and we'll get into that later, but I still want to stay on this. But I do notice whenever we'd be up playing cards with, my wife and some of the other ones and some of the other people, and you guys would be like, you'd be like, Abby, we're going to bed. Let's just, good night, guys. Love y'all.
Good night.
But that's probably what you were doing. Of course, we were kind of a little bit jacked up because we were over in Scotland, but that's funny.
Right. Yeah, I found that as best I can.
Yeah.
Ride that wave and stay in that space.
Mm-hmm.
I'm better. Here's why. Consistency of sleep matters the most.
Yeah.
And if we throw off our sleep one night, it actually takes 3 nights of consistent sleep before we feel really good again. Now you can cheat the system a little bit through naps, right? A 26-minute nap, 8 hours after you wake up, usually around 2 o'clock-ish, is optimal. If you're going to go longer than 26, you want to make sure you go 90 minutes, but never anywhere between 26 or 90, or it's counterproductive. But the idea there is, like, if you keep your sleep consistent as best you possibly can, you can be, and this is the key point, the emotionally healthiest version of ourselves. When we are the emotionally healthiest version of ourselves, our emotional energy is up in the 80s and the 90s for a longer period of time during the day. And thus, when it's up there, we can avoid burnout because we're feeling really good. In fact, if you go to the gym with an emotional energy of 92, you're going to have like even greater emotional energy when you leave. If you go to the gym at emotional energy of 62, you're probably going to leave even worse than when you got there. And so when you see high performers continually thriving at the highest level, it's because like every day they've got great sleep consistency and great quality of sleep because they're shutting the parasympathetic down ahead of time, and thus they're perpetually thriving. And am I perfect at that? No. But as best I possibly can, I really try to hold that part into my lifestyle as best I can.
And these are things I'm getting off tangent. So what are the next steps? Is there a next step that you hit on? Are we after that?
Yeah, look, I'm a little bit biased, but I just got to say it because I think it's really valuable. I think in life, we go to the gym, we work out, we try to eat right. All these people try to do all the things. But I think one of the things that's really important to add into our repertoire of stuff we do is one-on-one counseling. And so having the ability to talk to somebody one-on-one in a legally protected conversation is really incredibly valuable. And I also think that taking that one step further, like if you're going to be in a relationship with somebody, relationships are hard, right? Marriage is hard. And so because it requires work, because the emotionality of a marriage is that it shows like the ugly side of a person, or blind spots, the shadow side of the personality, as Carl Jung referred it to. So the idea is couples counseling is very valuable as well. So if 2 individuals are working on their individual stuff and then they come together and do some marriage stuff, like that kind of process can be really, really helpful for better emotional energy management, because we need to be able to Einstein once said, a problem cannot be solved at the level of consciousness for which it was created. Therefore, each person, including myself, despite my best efforts, like I can help somebody else with their psychological challenges, but I need to do my own individual work and couples work because I've created my own problems to a certain degree based upon the way that I think about them. But when I talk to somebody else about it at a deep, meaningful level, and they say, well, have you ever thought about it this way? And I think, no, actually, no, not at all. Why would I think that way? But it's a different level of consciousness looking at the same problem. And that is often where we get liberated from the rumination, perseveration of I'm stuck in a rut, just thinking about it over and over and over again the way I do. But I don't get anywhere in life with that because I haven't had the outside perspective. So that piece is so incredibly valuable for all people, all marriages. And I really advocate that.
Yeah, it's a good. Yeah, there are certain things we tend to think we're right, as you're
Yes.
speaking personally, but you have an incident with somebody and that's bothersome and you can ruminate on it because you're stuck in your own level of consciousness and thinking. By having a different framework come in changes the game totally. So yeah.
So when the student's ready, the teacher will appear, right? I feel like that's really true. And I feel like it's really important for us to find people to work with. The hard part is like, we grew up in a culture and age where it's like, no, we don't ever talk about our stuff with anybody. We don't open up, we don't share.
Yeah.
But the beautiful part about technology today is that a lot of this kind of counseling is actually done virtual.
Yeah.
And so a person can find somebody. It doesn't have to be somebody in the neighborhood. It could be somebody. Most of the work I do is around the country. Seldom in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, am I working with somebody or I go to them. And so we now have access because of technology to more opportunities to connect with people. I always say therapists are like shoes. If you have a good pair of shoes, you'll wear them a lot, get a lot of wear out of them. They'll be if they're uncomfortable, you're just not going to go anywhere with them. They're going to sit in your closet.
Yeah. Do you have any tricks or tips about finding somebody that that's probably just trial and error, just doing the groundwork?
No, actually, the way that most people find out about me, for example, is, an example is that a pro athlete I was just talking to earlier today was in a conversation with another person, and they said, "Oh, yeah, you ever talk to like a sports psychologist?" And they kind of like that person like tipped their cards.
Yeah.
And my client said, "Oh, absolutely, yeah." And then talks about me, and so obviously that's usually how a referral comes in.
Yeah.
Is that when birds of feather flock together and people talk and share, that's usually how people find like, well, who do you talk to? Okay. Think I got room to talk to that person too? And so that's usually how the conversation goes and how people find somebody that might be of the same ilk as them and usually kind of resonates with that person's challenges. So earlier we talked about the concierge psychologist role, the kind of high net worth, high capacity individual where success, money, fame, those bring unique problems that other people really don't understand. That's become my forte. When individuals talk to other individuals about those type of problems, they'll say, oh, well, you can talk to Jarrod. He's pretty familiar with that.
Yeah. So we talked about being biased, finding a counselor, finding somebody to actually do that inside out work with. What's next, man? What's the other part of the secret sauce?
Well, excitement is the number one emotion for peak performance. And so the more excited we are, the more we thrive in life. And so we cultivate excitement through the attitude of gratitude. The more grateful we are, the more excited we are. And so, there are things that make us come alive in this world. And the more we can gravitate to those people, places, things that make us come alive, that we get excited about, things are either going to drain your emotional energy, break even with your emotional energy, or increase your emotional energy. When you find those things that you're excited about and you do those things, that's where like the sweet spot of life is. So what excites a person?
Yeah.
How do we spend more time in that space? And if we can figure that out more and gravitate to that more, that's ultimately where we're feeling our best.
So what's something that you see whenever you work with people or professional athletes or, corporate
Yeah.
leaders that excites them, and you kind of unveil something and they're like, oh, this excites me. I'm going to do more of that to kind of fit that into my lifestyle to fulfill their emotional energy.
Well, more recently, I've actually been borrowing a little something that Simon Sinek said I think is actually really relevant here in this conversation, which is
Yeah.
that he said he didn't believe in strengths and weaknesses, but he believes that we all have attributes and characteristics. And the key is that when we have those attributes and characteristics in a certain context that accentuate those attributes and characteristics, then they're seen as strengths, right? And so when we spend more time in the context where an individual's attributes are being really valued, appreciated, effective, then we see that person thriving. But those same attributes, if you put them in a different context, no, they may not be valued, they may not be appreciated, they may not be utilized well, they may even be counterproductive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you think of an ER surgeon, right? You spent some time working the ERs, right? And so like ERs, like an ER surgeon, that's a unique spot. You know, they got to be orderly, perfectionistic, controlling, right? It's very much a crisis at that moment. And I want my ER docs to be like that because I'm a little bit OCD personality as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got the organization, the perfectionism, the control. And so in some ways that helps the ER doc in the surgery. But in other areas of life, they may be a little too perfectionistic or orderly or controlling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my own personal life, I have other areas where it's like, well, yeah, Jarrod, I need to be a little bit more relaxed. I be lower the standard. It's not quite as urgent. There's not the same degree of perfectionism that might be necessary. So you see, as we spend more time in environments that accentuate our positives and our not our positive, but our attributes, great. Let's do that more in life, but then also be aware of like, okay, when we're not in that context, either it's because it's everyday normal life. Maybe a listener here has like some little kids where their houses are wrecked, they're stepping on Legos while they walk to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and it's like, but understanding like that's okay in that context to not have that attributes being maximized, but they have to be more flexible in that other space. So that's an area where I find myself working with individuals and trying to help them navigate that.
Well, cool. That's great. So we've got being aware, giving yourself
Yeah,
a score, telling your
yeah,
wife your score when you come home so everyone's on the same page.
right.
Which brings me, and we'll go through these steps real quick just for myself, but so aware, do you ever come home to Abby and say, dude, I'm 50%, sweetheart, and then she just is like, okay, I can run with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I might just
Yeah.
say like, I'm done. You
Yeah.
know, I'm going upstairs. I'm done. I'm done for the
Yeah.
day. And I don't have anything in the tank. And that's okay. It's
Yeah.
actually healthier. It's actually
Yeah.
better for my marriage if I say that. Because if I don't say that
Mm-hmm.
and I just try to push through, then like being really honest with you, man, like I'm just going to be toxic. I'm going to be
Yeah. Yeah.
spread my toxicity. I'll be grumpy dad and irritable and cranky and moody and critical. And what am I like? What good am I doing at that point?
Yeah.
You know? So at that point in time, it's just better for me to remove myself
Yeah.
so that I can be the emotionally healthier version of myself. Maybe after I take some rest. I mean, maybe it just takes a little bit of rest, you know, it doesn't maybe have to be I'm done for the whole day. Maybe it's just like I need a little rest. But again, rest is resistance. It's not really something that's been valued in our society. But for us to say I'm gonna rest, that's a really important skill.
Mm. So aware. 2, outside in information, inside out, being cathartic. 3, tapping into your parasympathetic nervous system. And then what was the next one? And then we get to, excitement, attitude of gratitude. We talked about that. Any other big tools in the toolbox you have time to share today?
Yeah, I'll throw just a couple quick hitters out at people
Yeah.
that I think are really, really valuable and important to do. Happen to be a big fan right now of the classic cold tub and sauna. All the research behind that's really good for
Yeah.
mental health. I think that's really, really valuable. I do think we have to sweat every day, which is something that is hard sometimes in our culture and society, but we do, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
the more we can sweat every day through a workout, move the body, that is really necessary. Personally, I'm on a bit of a yoga kick right now, a little spinning
Really?
kick. Yeah, I'm on the spin bike and some yoga, and that's kind of my thing at the moment. But we do have to do something like that every day. I also believe strongly that like cultivating one's spirituality. Now, however a person may define that to be for them, pick what works for you, and but cultivate that, develop that, whatever that may look like for an individual. But beyond the mind, beyond the body, but touching into our spirit, to our soul, that's very important and can be very helpful for emotional energy management as well.
Well, cool. Well, yeah, I've. It's funny as we go through these things, and knowing what I do about you, just you do live this kind of stuff. Anything else to talk about there? I mean, I feel like I just miss you, man. I mean, we were just
Yeah,
in Pennsylvania, and what people probably don't know about you a little bit. I'd love to get into some of your history, actually, now, if it's a good time for that.
let's do that.
And just being over there, you were real gracious with your time, and we got to go on the Jarrod Spencer history tour of your life, and just touring around where you were at, where you came from, and some of the things you were involved in, and your experience with Larry Holmes and all that. It's just a really cool story that I don't know if many people know that about you, but super cool. And so, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, well,
yeah, how'd you get into this a little bit? And tell me a little bit about your history.
I'm a little biased, but as I travel the world more and look at all these other places, I really like where I'm from. So our home base is the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Phillipsburg, New Jersey, where there's a real emphasis on sports. Easton, Pennsylvania has the same. And of course, there's a rivalry between Easton and Phillipsburg that's legendary.
Mm-hmm.
Thanksgiving morning, we'll have like 15,000 fans to see the
Yeah.
best team off New Jersey compete against one of the best teams in Pennsylvania. And so, having played in all that and learned about pressure and about performing and also underperforming and those kind of experiences as a kid, I then parlayed that into a career in sports psychology. And along my journey, when I returned back to the Lehigh Valley, Larry Holmes, actually, the former heavyweight boxing champion of the world, gave me my start in sports psychology. I admittedly didn't have much seed money to get myself my own office and business up and running. And Larry was so gracious. He said to me, you can have the office across the hall from me. Now, mind you, that office was on Larry Holmes Drive,
Yeah.
across the street from the Larry Holmes statue,
Yeah.
in the Larry Holmes business complex, and across the hall from the Larry Holmes Enterprise.
Yeah.
And then Larry and I actually did a TV show together for the first year of my sports psychology career. And that instantly put me on the map.
Mm-hmm.
When people are like, oh, you partner with a former heavyweight boxing champion of the world, and we're doing a show talking about the mental side of life. And so that really was quite significant in my journey. And I learned a lot from him because he was mentored by Muhammad Ali. And so story after story that I hear from Larry
Yeah.
that he learned from Ali really helped me. So I find myself at times sharing with some individuals that I'm working with some things that actually came down the family tree from these greats, and now to me, and then off on to this next person that I'm serving. So I very much love what I get to do and the amazing people along my journey that I get to meet. But I also love coming back to Lehigh Valley and keeping that a home base.
Yeah. It's gorgeous out there. I had no idea. So while you're talking about that, what were some things that Larry Holmes passed on to you that you kind of held close that meant a lot, if you don't mind sharing that?
Well, one of the biggest is it's about how you treat people.
Yeah.
Larry is very approachable. He's very, very kind.
Mm-hmm.
And he really got a lot of that from Ali. Ali always took time for his fans and spoke to them, would do magic tricks with them. And Larry's the same way. He said he's like, anybody can fight a fight, anybody can win a fight, anybody can lose a fight, anybody can be a champion. He's like, not everyone's going to be nice. He said, it's very, very, very important to be nice. Mm-hmm. And he went on to say, like, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice. And I believe that in our community, he's valued and appreciated because he's nice.
Yeah. As you walk around that, I'd never been there before. It was obviously the whole area is almost a shrine to Larry Holmes, and he's got quite a footprint over there right on the river. It's gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's literally where he trained for his heavyweight fights. Where the confluence of the Lehigh and the Delaware River meeting. That's the Larry Holmes kind of like spot that I was speaking of. And there's a canal path,
Yeah.
and it said run down that canal path, and I'd have to run back up the canal path. And before every heavyweight fight, that's
Mm-hmm.
where he did a lot of his mental training is on that simple path. So it's interesting. A lot of times people will say, oh, how did somebody become so successful? And what did they do? And what are the secrets that they've applied in their life? And in my profession, I get to have those kind of, intimate conversations with people about those deeper emotional parts of their journey. And I get to learn those things like right there. And Larry would always get into the attitude of gratitude on that
Mm-hmm.
fun, which led to excitement and which led to the number one emotion peak performance. And thus, he would tell me, like, in his day, they'd do like 15 rounds of heavyweight fighting. They don't do that anymore. But he said, I'd be on my stool looking out at that guy, and I'd say to myself, I'm more grateful for this moment than that person is. And he would cultivate the gratitude, which he learned that from Ali. And so when he had the gratitude, he had the excitement, he had the positive emotion. And he said, I always was able to win in these fights because I knew I was more grateful for these moments. So interesting how a simple concept of gratitude, but in cultivating that, particularly on the runs he would do where his mind would break down, his body would break down, his spirit would break down, but he couldn't stop running. He said it. And
Mm-hmm.
he said that's what it was like in those fights. That's really where I believe we can take pages out of other people's playbooks,
Right.
put it in our playbook so that we might be the better version of ourselves. And Larry helped me do that personally and then with other people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. What a great experience. What a great deal. How did you come across him in the first place? How does that happen?
Yeah, well, he's very approachable in the community, but through a mutual friend,
Right. Got it. Yeah.
and so through that mutual friend that knew I was looking for some space, and said,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know Larry, maybe he could help you out, and so there I am sitting in his office with him, and of
Yeah.
course, revering him, and he's got all these heavyweight
Mm-hmm.
belts all on the walls around him and all, and
Yeah.
I was intimidated, but I walked out of that room being like, gosh, what a nice guy. He's going to help me out. Why
Yeah.
would this guy who's so powerful help out me? And he's kind.
Yeah, that since we've talked, I did some reading on Larry Holmes. I enjoy boxing, but I don't know a lot about the history in great detail like you do, which brings me to the point of you're quite the history buff, which we'll get into here in a minute. I know we need to probably wrap up soon, and you talked about this, Larry Holmes beating, Muhammad Ali in that fight and looking at some of that stuff and how he was just torn up to have to, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit. I'm sure it was quite a deal where he had to, it kind of broke his heart to, you
Yeah.
know,
Well, there's a wonderful 30 for 30 on ESPN called
yeah,
Muhammad and Larry.
yeah,
And it really talks about, that story you're referring to. But essentially, Larry's a seventh grade dropout, and he becomes a fighter because Ali trained for his fights near us in the Lehigh Valley. And with his sparring partner, and Larry was that, but he became more of a friend and an understudy.
yeah,
So ultimately, as it often goes in sports, like you may be the man now, but there's always like somebody else coming up behind you that it's eventually going to take your spot when your body no longer can do what it once did. And of course, that's what happened to Ali in the classic fight between he and Larry Holmes. Larry beat him,
yeah,
and that was hard for Larry because Ali just wouldn't go down and was stubborn, and so he's on his feet, and he wasn't defending himself well. So Larry kept punching as he
yeah,
had to.
yeah,
But again, the emotionality of life, the
mhm.
emotionality of sports, and how important it is for all of us to be working on it as much as we possibly can. That's the one piece of healthcare that's underdeveloped, underutilized, but incredibly powerful.
Well, yeah, this has been great. I really appreciate it. I don't know how much longer you have, but I just really appreciate the time. And by the way, you are a history buff, and it was helpful. I learned so much about history. I didn't have good history teachers in high school at all. Great guys, but they were all, high school sports guys. They were just, checking the
Sure.
boxes. seemed like. So I was out there and I had an actual history professor talking to me about George Washington crossing the Delaware River, the whole story. And you knew that in great detail. So it was like having a play
Yeah.
by play of what actually happened. It was almost like a narrated movie in my mind. It was a
Thank
great,
you. It's fun to share that with you. And I think one of the keys about when you live in Eastern Pennsylvania,
yeah,
New Jersey, there is so much history.
yeah.
Literally just drove through New Jersey yesterday and
Hmm.
said, oh, there's a huge tree there with a flag on it. It's like, they say Washington slept under that tree. And there's a lot of that as you travel around our area. So it's so much fun for me to learn from the past. And I think that's a piece sometimes we don't often value, but the more we learn from the past, there's great wisdom there. Wisdom is really healed pain. So when somebody's healed the pain, they seem that they're wise, and particularly emotional pains. And so when you study history and we think about how this country was settled and the Revolutionary War, which there's all kinds of landmarks around me, as I study that stuff, you can see the pain, the emotional pain, but you can also see how individuals became wise and why we still revere them today. And so because I'm so into psychology, I love studying from the past. I love talking to elderly people and picking their brain about life then and what worked, why it worked, how it worked. That's really strength psychology. And so becoming a bit of a history buff is really about learning about the mind of those individuals like George Washington and how I can take a page out of his playbook. For example, one thing he once wrote to a mentee was the importance of getting up early, get your day going. Don't just be sleeping in, but like get up in the morning, get out in the sunshine, move your body, you'll feel better. And I think, wow, that's a simple nugget of wisdom from George Washington. But when we're treating depression, for example, that is something that may not be so easy to do, but so valuable to do. So we learn from the past, we're less likely to repeat those bad spots. We all know that. But what if we actually can thrive because we took something from Muhammad Ali or Larry Holmes or George Washington and put it into our playbook today? That's what I love sharing with people.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I love being with you. I'm grateful to call you my friend, and just being out there is like, or just hanging out with you and your wife has been a great time. You and Matt and the whole gang, but and Kim. Uh, it's always good to see you, man. Is there anything else you want to leave? I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're a busy guy, but
Yeah. Well, people always will say, like the most podcasts, how do I get more? Right? How do
yeah,
I,
yeah.
and of
How do
course,
we find you? And tell us about your book
right,
coming out. I'm excited
right,
about
yeah.
it.
So the book and the website, right? Those are always the two keys.
Yeah.
But um, the website being drjarrodspencer.com. That's DRJARROD, right? And that's where most people can get the information they're looking for about me and how to connect further.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the third book is being written now, working on the editing process. The book is entitled Emotional Energy, and the subtitle is Your Fuel for Better Health and Performance. And this book talks a lot about a deep dive on much of what we talked about today, the emotional energy scale and what it is, and the rest, recharge, recovery, as well as anxiety, depression, and really how do we thrive. And so that book will be coming out, available in 2026.
Okay, in next year. Okay.
Advanced copies will come out end of the summer, and then I'll float them around for a few months to key individuals to get feedback, endorsements, insights. And so if somebody wants to be part of that, sure, just reach out to me. I'd be happy to send them an advanced copy. And all I ask is they read it and give me the feedback so that when early 2026, when that book comes out, when the final copy comes out, we have it even better.
Cool. Great. Well, Jarrod, I really appreciate your time. I cannot say it enough. I just think the world of you,
My
man.
pleasure. Sincerely, my pleasure.
If anybody has a soul or a brain out there, they really need to follow your stuff, because I found so much value in reading your books, and it's really made me think about a lot of things that I hadn't. So you're salt of the earth, brother. So I really appreciate you.
I
Appreciate your
appreciate
work.
you too, Kev, and all the work you do. And
Yeah.
so the impact you have on so many people in medicine and well beyond that in your areas of life. So look forward to our continued journey together.
All right. All right. Thanks a lot, man. I'll see you later.
All the best. God bless.
All right. Thanks for listening. You can follow us on Apple and Spotify, and please review us to let us know what you think. Thanks.